Ron Satterfield, who many of you have had as an instructor before, and Rick Skaggs, who's it's technically the CEO of the credit union. Is that the right title?
That's correct.
And they're going to talk about the credit union and the use of case studies and all sorts of things. And I'll just turn it over to you guys right now.
My name's Rick Will. Today I'm here representing the University of South Florida Federal Credit Union. We're here to talk about the leadership and the board governance and the strategic planning process at the USF Federal Credit Union. But first, I'd like the panelists introduce themselves, first with our President and CEO, Rick Skaggs.
Good morning, everyone. Nice to join you today. I'm the President and CEO of the Credit Union. I've been at the Credit Union for 11 years. And prior to that, I've been in the credit union system. I was actually the executive vice president of the Disney Credit Union, and I managed the Disney operations from California and Florida. So it was nice to get to USF because it cut down on the traveling and going across the country so much. And I've had the fortunate to work with a great board of directors, who we have two of them on with us this morning as part of our governance. So I look forward to talking with you and sharing information about how we do things at the credit union.
Ron?
You're muted.
Usually I pay better attention to that. Thank you for bringing that to my attention. I'm Ron Satterfield. I've been on faculty in the Muma College of Business for a number of years. I have had several different teaching assignments over my time there. Most lately, what I'm doing is I'm teaching a number of courses in basic statistics and basic statistical programming with R in our Master of Science in Business Analytics program. I've also been working for Grandin for several years, teaching the initial basic statistics course in the DBA program. And on the side, I also serve on the board of the USF Federal Credit Union and on a couple of our committees and governance, which I'll mention a bit later on, and have been working with both Ricks actually, on this endeavor now for several years. And we look forward to sharing with you what we do and what we have gotten out of it.
And I'm Rick Will. I am, I think it's called Emeritus Professor, or Professor Emeritus, whatever it's called, because I retired from USF not quite a year ago, but still involved, like to visit with the DBAs on the Wednesday socials. Currently, past few years, I've been the board chair of the USF Federal Credit Union, which has been both a delight and a challenge, and I can really thank Ron Satterfield for stepping up and serving on so many different committees and kind of bailing me out a lot, and definitely I don't think we would have been doing the kind of strategic planning processes that we would as a credit union without Ron helping me out with these doesn't seem like endless interviews, but just incredible interviews. And Rick Skaggs is a true model of cooperative leadership. So I'm going to quit patting ourselves on the backs and tell you a little bit about, I think, if I can get this moved. Yes. Okay, here's the agenda. We're going to go over this hopefully very quickly, but to give you an idea of some things that we thought you might be interested in. And our plan is to leave the majority of this entire session for questions and answers. We're going to tell you a little bit about the structure of the USF Federal Credit Union governance so that you kind of understand the process that we're actually go through. And Rick Skaggs is going to take lead on the leadership system and our operational rhythm. And then all three of us are going to jump back in with the overall strategic planning process. And then Ron and I will pretty much cover how we're doing something unique. At least Grandin says it's unique, of the way we've flipped those Harvard-style discussion cases, which are usually for bringing industry in the classroom. We actually do it in industry for industry. So with that, Rick, you want to talk about the senior management team?
Yes, as part of the governance of the credit union, obviously we have our leadership team. and that is made up of 6 senior vice presidents and vice presidents that oversee various operations within the credit union. And those team members report to me, and then ultimately I report to the board of directors. So we have the different senior leadership team broken down, and it would be, I think it'd be things that you're familiar with how it'd be broken down with the vice president of finance, the vice president of marketing, vice president of risk, etc. So it's a very structured model, and then we cascade that down to directors in the credit union, and then ultimately managers and assistant managers.
The board of directors, basically we have 9 directors on the board, and we have some phenomenal talent on the board. It's quite humbling. I don't know that Dwayne Smith, Senior Vice Provost of the university, is one of the vice chairs. Scott Beasley, former chair of the finance department in the Muma College of Business, he's there. Ron Satterfield obviously is there. We have the director of treasury for Darden, the Darden restaurant chains, the Capitol Grill, the Eddie V's, the Longhorn Steak, etc. We also have counsel at Darden who is also on our board of directors. That's just to mention a few. And then we have a supervisory committee that does all the oversight of audits for the credit union, both the internal audits and the external audits that come both from the NCUA, which is our governing body, and our auditors that come in. And so they're designed to ensure that they keep us out of trouble. And then we have a whole lot of subcommittees, which sometimes they come and go. Some of them are always there. But Ron, would you mind going through some of those?
Yes, we have several subcommittees on our board that more or less are charged with looking at different aspects of credit union operations and policy concerns and giving them a closer view, and then reporting back to the full board on what they have. Probably the most active, and I hesitate to say most important, but certainly one of the most visible ones, is our ALCO, our Asset Liability Committee. That meets on more or less a monthly basis, but that's where a lot of the financial decisions about credit union operations are made. And we are very unique among credit unions in terms of at our ALCO meetings, oh goodness, what would you say, Rick? We typically have somewhere between 4 and 7 board members in attendance.
Yeah,
right.
At every one. We don't have to come, but we do because we want to be in touch with the finances of the credit union. I have worked with the credit union round numbers for about 15 years. And the growth we have experienced at the credit union has been phenomenal. We were slightly more than 200 million in asset size when I joined the credit union, working on the supervisory committee. And now, Rick, unless something's changed, we are a bit more than $900 million and cruising very comfortably towards $1 billion in asset size.
Yeah, it did change. With the tremendous stimulus that's come in, we're up to about 940 million now. So
yes,
it's been substantial growth. Yeah,
it has been amazing growth. In addition to ALCO, we also have a compensation committee that is headed by, as Rick Will was mentioning, the general counsel for Darden Restaurants, who is really invaluable for that. Nominations committee, looking at nominating new or returning members to the board. A policy committee. By federal regulation, we have many, many policies that govern our operations and that we are required to review and update periodically, and our policy committee handles the grunt work on that. The Information Technology Committee, which I chair, is also one that is really critical in terms of, hey, money is information these days, and everything we do involves information technology. We have a new group that is our Commercial Loan Review Committee, because we have recently moved into granting more and more commercial loans in a variety of sectors and everywhere in the country. And then I also chair the Strategic Planning Committee, which is the primary thing we're going to talk about here. And the Strategic Planning Committee, we've done some very interesting and unique things, particularly in the credit union world. with how we develop strategic plans and how we make sure strategic planning grows from the board so that we are the ones that are determining the direction of the credit union. Is that fair to say, Rick? Either Rick?
Yeah.
It's fair to say we definitely are fulfilling the responsibilities that are assigned to us by the NCUA, our governing body. It is a absolute joint effort. Even though we've separated it lately, it actually seems to make everything work better together. And that's that cooperative leadership that I don't think we could do without. Okay, Rick, Skaggs, if you don't mind talking a little bit about the leadership system, give some background on that.
Yeah, I'll go through this and give you a little detail about this because, you know, everything starts with leadership. And so we're talking about, you know, strategy and strategy planning and how do we get there. But you've got to have your leadership model in place. And we did not have this actually so formal until a few years ago. And it was interesting. We were doing all these things, but we didn't have it down. And so we've created our system so that you can see it here. We interview to this. This is how we make sure that we're hiring the right people coming into the credit union, and they understand very specifically what's going to be required of them as they join us. But you'll see we start in the center, and we're a little bit different about the value proposition because most people and most companies have a value proposition for the company, but we added value proposition for our talent, or our talent is what we call, you know, our employees. And so we're very pleased that we have a value proposition that looks external to our members, but we have a value proposition looking internal to our staff. And I could go into a lot of detail about that, but our surveys and the information that we get back from our team tell us how important that is, that they feel valued, that we're focused on them and career development. Around the outer band are our attributes that we expect all leaders to bring to their position. It's very straightforward. If you look at agile, we never had to be as agile as we've been in the last 15, 16 months. And I think because we hire to these attributes, we were actually able to pivot very quickly and necessary to remain, you know, where we did and to keep the credit union very strong. If you come on in, if you start to the right, well, we start by setting and communicating our plan out and setting clear direction. We then align people and processes. This takes a lot of time because as an agile company, we have to bob and weave and move people around. And one thing that really changed for us was last year was our ability to immediately rush out and be able to be approved and start issuing PPP loans to keep people employed and to get those funds out. Well, of course, we had no direction with that from the SBA, but we had to move and align people very quickly. And we were actually able to lend out about $18 million in PPP loans, which kept, you know, people in the Tampa Bay area employed. And that was very important to us. We want to, of course, move along and to direct and achieve our plan. And we take steps, and we have many meetings throughout the weekly meetings, quarterly meetings, to make sure that we are on track to achieve our plan. And we want to also ensure that we have ongoing organizational and individual learnings because we take time. You know, this is one of the things that the model teaches us is to take time and to look at how we're achieving the results that we are. And if we're not, we have different mechanisms and levers that we can move and adjust to make sure we do stay on track. And then measure and evaluate performance. Well, this is something that's really grown and continues to grow, and it's actually a very valuable tool to use this in evaluating performance because we're always changing metrics and things become important that weren't important before. And that's really been critical through this whole pandemic is how we were measuring certain things, and absolutely they weren't as important as things that then popped up. So it's like the flywheel, and you just continually work these. And I won't go into the great detail, but in each area, we have drill down on how we do it. I could pull one out, and well, we're going to talk about the first one, the set and communicate direction. Well, it's strategy development. That's where we're developing the strategy that we're going to use on how we're going to ultimately, measure our success. We're going to deploy the strategy, and we have several ways to, within that particular confine, to communicate the direction. We use things such as 90-day teams that come in when we have different projects that we need to work on to move the plan forward, and we need to get those done. We have specific teams that work on the projects. We have rapid improvement events if we're falling off track, if it looks like things aren't moving, and we have used those rapid improvement events on several different projects that we've had to ensure that the strategy is moving forward. We then classify things as just do it, just get it done. And so we have different mechanisms within each of these areas to really move the strategy forward. Rick or Ron, anything else you wanted to add on the leadership system?
No,
Well,
I think it covers it well.
the only thing I would add is a lot of this has evolved out of what we call at the credit union the Baldrige journey. We have been on this Baldrige journey for quite some time, and unashamedly, we've got the logo for the 2020 Governor Sterling Award, which is the actual state of Florida version of the Baldrige Award, basically. And we were pretty psyched up about that. The employees, all the employees were totally psyched up about that. And we're in the process of applying for the Baldrige journey. But I don't think that, and Rick Skaggs, you can comment, but I'm not sure we would be where we are now had we not started that journey. And this is something that Rick Skaggs brought to the board years ago. There was not 100% buy-in from the board immediately, but I can tell you there's absolutely 100% buy-in from the board now. Rick, anything?
Well, no, I would encourage you to go in there and get some information on how the Malcolm Baldrige Performance Excellence is structured, because that's been the basis of how we have actually rebuilt the credit union. I mean, honestly, when I came to the credit union, we have rebuilt the model. And we, as Rick said, it's based on the Malcolm Baldrige criteria. And so we have changed, as I said, we did not even have leadership systems. We had them, but they weren't documented and they weren't in place. And so now this is a good tool. And one of the things we're not going to share today, but is our strategy map. That's all on an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper, which is remarkable that you can take a company's strategy and bring it down to something. And that's another thing that we've learned through a best practice out of the work that we're doing with the Malcolm Baldrige criteria. And so it has changed. And to Rick's point, I don't think that we would have been able to pivot and to do as successfully as we did through something none of us had ever encountered before in our businesses, a pandemic, as we did. And because of having the alignment that we have, we've been able to have very high engagement scores with our staff. And that really has made carrying the water a whole lot easier than just a small percentage of people being engaged. And we've been able to move our engagement scores up, and I'm very proud of this, up to 91%. And when you have that many of your staff engaged, you can carry more water and it's not so heavy. So yeah, I have nothing but good things to say about the Malcolm Baldrige criteria, and winning the Governor Sterling Award last year was just, again, recognition for the work that we've done as one of the best in the state of Florida.
Absolutely. And I can speak to, we could do a whole other presentation if we chose to, just on the improvements in competitiveness and internal efficiency that have been wrought at the credit union just from pursuit of Sterling and Baldrige. We never got into this with the idea being we would win awards. That was not the primary goal. The goal was to make a better credit union. And we have achieved that in spades. It has just been wonderful what we have achieved.
There we go. Okay, Rick,
Yeah.
again, you're up with operational rhythm.
Yeah, and so we exercise operational rhythm in our institution to make sure that we keep all of our strategy moving. And on some of those outers, you can see, you just saw this, but you can see how we do it through our annual strategic planning session. We're going to give you more detail on that. But then we have all these other different opportunities to make sure that, as if when we're talking about planning and aligning processes, well, we use that through our monthly all-staff meetings to make sure that there's uniformity in the way that we're talking and delivering the direction of the credit union. That was, when I came to the credit union, that was the most outstanding issue we had from our surveys of our staff was, I don't understand the strategy and the direction. It's not clear. So we really slowed down, took our time, as I said, got this strategy map together, and we review that at all of our staff, all staff meetings, but those also cascade, down into the organization as well. So it's very important. From that, we get department scorecards, and from department scorecards, then we drive down to individual goals. And so people are held accountable for those. There's a whole structure around how that works, but that's how we make sure that the aligning of people and processes continue. You look down at direct and achieve the plan. We have the change the business meetings. Now this is a senior level. This is a leadership level meeting of change the business. We do that, it says monthly, but every other Tuesday we do run the business. And I think that's really been very effective to really make sure that our senior leadership team meetings don't go off track. And we used to spend several hours in our meetings, and I often wondered, well, did we accomplish anything when we got done? But changing this structure and the rhythm to a run the business and a change the business, we are actually got our meetings down to an hour and a half. Sometimes they don't go that long, and they're more effective. We're getting more work done by not having everything lumped into the same senior leadership meeting. So I love this, because the change the business is the really exciting one, where you're talking about how are we going to change things to make sure that we're relevant and that we're, taking on the appropriate risk in the credit union as well. We want to ensure ongoing organizational and personal learning. As I told you, this is very important on the surveys from our staff. Well, how do we do this? One of the things we do is that we're working on a business project management model so that we can move things rapidly through our company. We have ongoing learning opportunities, and these have been changing over the years. We actually committed to this by closing our offices on Wednesdays and not opening until 10 o'clock, so that we could ensure that we are preparing staff that are knowledgeable and experienced to help our members. And I appreciate that, because that was taking some time that we were open away from our members, but in surveying our members, they've said that time's been well spent, because we get answers to their questions more easily by having an engaged staff. And then it is a organizational goal that we support ongoing learning for everyone in the company. Measure and evaluate performance. Why are we doing all this? If we don't measure it and we don't have standards in place, what is it for? So, measurements, as I said, have become much more critical to us. It's the way we execute our operational rhythm is through the measurements and the evaluation. We review our performance, how we're doing, and we'll take action if it's not, and probably not news to you, but we use a color coding system. And if everything is green, we don't need to deal with it. If it's yellow, we're talking about it. If it's red, we should have already known about it, because it would have turned yellow before it turned red. So we've been fortunate by implementing this wheel, if you will, that we have not had reds. And I think that's another ingredient of the success, because everything has challenges and everything changes. But if you can jump in there when it's yellow and make adjustments through whatever it may mean, people, alignment, or processes, and get it back on the green, then you stay on track for your strategy. Well, why do you do the whole thing? You look at that whole flywheel. It's to deliver that excellence. It's to deliver the results that we've been asked to deliver by our strategic plan. And when things come to my office, that's the first thing I want to, well, I ask two questions. Every time there's a project or there's any type of discussion about which way we should go, I have two questions. I say, what is the impact to our members? If the impact to our members is not positive, we go back to the drawing board. So you can't get through me if it's not a positive impact on our members. And is it in line with our strategy? And since we have really built this model that we're talking about this morning, if it's not within strategy, they used to come forward and bring things, but it would stick out like a sore thumb. And so now we don't really have people that are bringing different ideas or projects or direction that are outside of the actual strategy that we have, embarked upon by working with our board and how we're going to deliver excellence in our company. So that kind of gives you a feel of what operational rhythm looks like as we move to deliver the plan.
Rick, probably the only thing I want to add to that is from the board's perspective, when anything is brought to the board, we always will ask the question of how does this decision affect our membership? It's not about an individual member, but it's about the membership. And Rick is right. I know it gets to his desk, but when it gets to the board, that's one of the first things his entire board is going to be asking. That's
right.
So the overall strategic.
And if I could, I'm sorry, Rick. I didn't mean I want everyone to know that the way we're doing this and the way we've described this and what we're laying out here is not common in the credit union system. This is why we won an award here in Florida, because we're doing things differently. And the framework that we're working in has allowed our company to have fabulous results. It doesn't matter. I tell the board this all the time. Whatever you want to measure, we are at the top of the scale. And it could be financial. It could be from our membership, feedback from members on membership surveys, or for our staff survey, our employee climate surveys. And so this type of a system, of an operational rhythm, does work. It does resonate, and we have the financial and measurements to prove that it does.
I'm going to try to go through some of this a little because I promised we'd have a lot more time for discussion. So I'm going to, if the panel doesn't mind, I'm going to run through this kind of quickly. But our annual strategic planning process is not just something that happens once a year. And it is a big get together and once a year. And with the strategic planning process and there's some changes we're going to get to in the next slide, how we were doing the volunteer discussion case method at the end of the strategic planning session, and then we just pulled it out entirely to where the volunteers meet independently and come up with strategic directives, and then those are presented to management where they have time to actually review those and come up with an overall strategic plan, which they present back to the board. It's helped in a lot of different ways. I'll talk about that in a minute. But after the strategic planning process, we review the strategic plan every single month in the board meetings. And that's that strategy map that Rich Skaggs was talking about earlier, that we actually look at that map every single time. We have presentations, strategic presentations on different areas that either board members have asked about and then management prepares for, or management says, well, the board needs to know about this and it is strategic and we need to know whether or not you're on board with this. And so they'll bring it to us. And so all of these things are happening throughout the entire year. Every single month we're reviewing our strategic plan. and it gets rolled back to that operational rhythm where we're talking to all the employees in the entire credit union once a month about what these strategic plans are, how they have changed, if there are changes in goals and why there's changes in goals, and et cetera. Rick, did you want to add some more? I was kind of wanting to get to the last little summary and then open it up for questions. We can come back to any of this stuff.
That's right. Go ahead. That's good. Okay. Yes.
Okay, and Ron, I want you to jump in a little bit later, especially if we get into the interview part. But the discussion case method, which all of you are familiar with, or most of you are familiar with from Grandin. He is the one that introduced me to the discussion case method. Actually, before 2013, we actually ran a typical discussion case. We brought USF Federal Credit Union technology issues to our senior level undergraduates to get their ideas. And so there was a discussion case built, published, and we ran it several times. I think Grandin ran it once, and then I ran it probably about 3 times. And we got such incredible feedback. And all the DBAs I know are totally unfiltered, but the undergraduates are also very unfiltered. And we were able to get all these ideas about what we should be doing, changing technologies, expectations of technology. And within probably about 3 years, everything that the students had suggested, we had implemented along with some other things. And then I talked to Grandin about this and was wondering whether or not he thought it was a good idea to use a discussion case at the board level meetings, and he thought that was a pretty novel idea. Let's do a discussion case, not to bring industry into the classroom, but to use it in industry for industry. And so we started in 2013 doing that. We kind of did it at the end of the planning session. And then we did it again in 2015. The idea was, well, we'll do this every 2 years because it's a pretty deep dive for us. And then in 2017, we decided that it would be more effective to actually pull this out and do it prior to the joint strategic planning process session. Now, this calls for a lot of different realignment because the volunteers would always get all of the economic data, other credit union trends, what's going on in retail, what's going on in the different industries, auto, mortgage, all that stuff. And so we had, the volunteers had to actually come up with that ourselves so that we could kind of present that to the volunteers. So we did that in 17 and 19, again, following the 2-year process. And then things seem to be changing pretty rapidly, and we decided that we couldn't wait another 2 years to do it again. And so we did it again in 2020. There were some interesting issues involved with that particular one, and we're going to do it again this year. And I will say, and I'll put it on record, Grandin, that our next volunteer strategic planning session are the documents that we will produce for all of the volunteers will be in the format of the Muma case review. So the idea is that we really want to share more detail with this, the particular process. Ron and I will, we send out a questionnaire, which includes a variety of things on, not necessarily that, well, these are some expectations. We do mission, vision, values reassessment. We do, for the entire credit union, we do SWOT analysis. I don't like spending too much time on that, but we do that. And then we look at critical success factors. So, what should we be doing well? We get that feedback. Ron and I go through that. And then Ron and I conduct interviews with every single volunteer. And then we summarize it and send it back to each of the volunteers so that they can edit and correct it and send it back to us so that we don't get anything wrong. And then we publish this in the discussion case so that everyone sees everyone else's stuff. And the idea is at the end of our volunteer strategic planning process, the whole board is on the same page. We have agreed to what those strategic directives should be that we want to communicate to management. There are a lot of other subtleties, but that was kind of the gist of it. Ron, would you like to add anything to that?
Well, one advantage of that is when we walk into our in-person strategic planning session every year, everybody knows more or less where everybody's coming from. We know what areas of discussion we are sharing opinions on and where we might have some divergence. Frankly, I think it's also resulted in less divergence because people have more of an opportunity to learn what their peers on the board are thinking. And one interesting thing that Rick, Will, and I have talked about several times is since we do the interviews and we write up the results of the interviews, submit those to the interviewee for any changes they want to make, Rick and I know the board members better than anybody. And we know what they're thinking. We know what their concerns are. We know the directions they would like to see the credit union go. That part is extremely instructive. And it has resulted, in terms of our strategic planning and our outlooks for the credit union, it's a much more cohesive group than we have had in the past, because we do spend the time making sure everybody's voice is heard. And if somebody hears a better idea, I can't tell you how many times this happened. I've heard from other board members better ideas than what I got. I just say, okay, yeah, I like what they're saying. And I wind up discarding what I want to do because I have an opportunity to hear other points of view, and my opinions are swayed.
A couple of things, and Rick Skaggs, I'd like your comment on this, but a couple of things is, well, one is when I approached Rick Skaggs about doing this in the first place, I mean, we did have some success with the discussion case in the classroom, but this was going to be a little bit different. So it really is my way of saying thanks to our entire senior management team, our leadership team, for having the willingness to do this. We got board buy-in to do this. I do believe the evolution of where we actually do it separate, you think maybe that's not a good idea, but it gets all of us on the same page when we go into the strategic planning processes, joint process, so that our leadership team is not being blindsided by any particular board member with an agenda, because we've already gone through that and have pretty much a consolidated joint view on, what our expectations of our leadership team. Anyway, Rick, comments?
Yeah, I would just comment that when we first went into this, I was very apprehensive about doing it like this. We had success with the case studies, as Rick said earlier, with the students, and the model worked very well. So we wanted to really expand that and move it over to the volunteers, because you're always concerned as the leader is there going to be convergence of the views and where we need to go. I didn't feel that there would be gaps, but I didn't feel there would be big gaps. I felt there would be gaps. But as we refined this, it's really made leading easier from a strategy standpoint, because we have had some, side road activities in the past at some of our planning sessions where that alignment was and convergence was not there. And so this has allowed, as they just described, allowed that to be dealt with in a different fashion. And it's allowed management, I think, to really move the plan forward more rapidly. And it doesn't require more meetings. That was what was happening, because we weren't getting out what we needed at the big session because of the we didn't have the convergence that we needed. So it delayed us continuing to go forward with the plan. Well, that doesn't happen now. So we get in there, we know where we're going. I already have a good feel for this, and we can keep then setting operational direction and rhythm in place to deliver the plan even earlier and more effectively and efficiently than we would otherwise. So I do believe in this, that this is not common. This is not what's done in most institutions in the world that I work in. And so I think we have something very unique here, and it's really helped us.
With that, I think I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Just open it up for any questions that we might have. Susan, what you got?
Yeah. Hey, Rick, you probably remember I'm doing my dissertation on nonprofit governance. So, looking at a bunch of the factors of best practices, of all the boards I've surveyed, where everybody seems to fall short is board self-evaluation. And so do you guys do that and do an inward look? Do you do board member, individual evals or you're laughing, but yeah, no, I mean, that was really kind of the most interesting thing. Well, and then the second part of that is I also found, a lot of boards don't have audit committees. Do you guys have a separate audit committee, or does that fall under ALCO?
That falls under the supervisory committee.
Okay.
The supervisory committee is our audit committee.
Okay.
They audit everything. As far as board evaluations, we do it every year. We do peer evaluations every year. Luckily, the last 2-3 years, they're pretty much been non-events. However, we've been using them for a while, and we have actually asked board members to not return as a result of the evaluations. I mean, if it's something we can work with, we'll be glad to work with the board member. If it's time for the renomination and we don't feel like they've made any progress, the nominating committee will actually just not nominate them.
Yeah. How long, or what are your term limits then?
Term limits are 3 years.
Okay.
And it's rotating. So basically a third of the board every 3 years. And this always comes up in the sessions Rick and I have gone to. It's a chair CEO conference, and they're always talking about how do you get rid of, with no better term, how do you get rid of board members who are ineffective or actually,
non-contributory.
Yeah, non-contributory, or actually worse than that, they're distraction at the board meetings. And some of these people have come up with age limits, and I just thought I don't like using the word, but I just told a whole room full of CEOs and chairs that I thought that was really stupid. I said, I did volunteer work for President Jimmy Carter. He was 75 years old when I first started working with him. I did it for about 12 years. The man was, at 75, the man was sharp as a tack. I said, you want to kick him off your volunteer board? Not me. I mean, so I don't think it had anything to do with age. So we weren't using age as a factor at all. Never even considered it. But annual peer review evaluations, and you have to understand a lot of them are academics, so they have no problem in telling you that they got issues with what you're doing.
And if I could just jump in there also, the other thing too is the caliber and the governance that's being expected of the volunteer boards by the regulators is really different now than it was 5 years ago. And that continues to expand. I can remember when we would have the regulators come in, if the board was being questioned by the regulator, they could defer to the CEO. They could defer to the CFO. That doesn't happen anymore. And when the regulators are asking questions, they expect board members to understand and to answer the questions. And that's why, to Ron's point a little bit earlier, the ALCO committee, it's a critical committee that we have. That's why so many of the board members come to that committee, is because they need to understand asset liability and the risk that's involved in the credit union. And so that's why I think while they may not have this type of model that we have in other institutions, they're going to have to change their boards to become more reflective of what's being required in the world that we live in. Not to mention our institutions are getting so much bigger now. You know, credit unions used to be small, very small institutions. We're not small, we're $1 billion. So I think that has more bearing on it as well.
Other question I had is, you know, you mentioned that you allow all board members into every committee. Do you give them voice when they're in committees if they're not on that committee, but you allow them in meetings? That can be, I can see that kind of making things go off the rails a little bit.
Well, part of the success of the committees is we can talk about tactical, operational things inside of a committee that we should not be talking about at a board level meeting. And so it is the responsibility of the board chair, currently me, to actually assign people to the committees. And I do get them to volunteer to be on the committees. And but every single board member has some sort of committee responsibility. So I try not to tax them too much. Ron is probably the one I tax the most. Everyone is involved on one or more of those committees. And if they have a complaint about, you know, if they want to be on a committee, I will find a way to get them on the committee if they really, really want to be on the committee. But I try to balance the load, since they're all volunteers, and also pick skill sets for the different committees. That's why our chief counsel person, I asked him to be on the compensation committee. It's really, really helpful to have counsel on that particular committee. And obviously the director of treasury for Darden, he's now our treasurer at the credit union. We have several people that can do the job. He does an outstanding job. Oh yeah. And he loves doing it. So as long as he still loves doing it, but we have a lot of people at the ALCO meeting. That's the one that the treasurer has to go to. And I think I generally have to go to all of the committee meetings.
I would also say, Susan, one of the other things that's changing is continuing that idea that I was talking about regulatory involvement with our boards. While I don't get involved with the selection and the nomination, we do look, Rick and I do look at when we do have an open seat where we have gaps, whether we need someone in the legal side, whether we need someone with human resources side, whether we need it marketing, whatever it may be. We're looking at skill sets that we want to make sure we have from all board members so that we're covered around governance, so that if there is a particular expertise that's not represented on the board presently, when we have an open seat, we want to make sure that we cover that. IT being a very important one of them. We're so fortunate to have Rick and Ron, who both have IT background, that ensure that our governance around IT is where it should be.
Brandon, it almost looked like you wanted to ask something there.
Yeah, actually, yes, I was just curious, as you develop these case studies and present them, how are they communicated to the board? Do you just give them the document, or do you have a facilitated discussion? I'm just interested in the mechanics of that.
Okay. Yeah. No, Brandon, this is great. No, you taught me well. Yes, we give them a document to review ahead of time, and it's even more detailed now that it's separated. So we have that. But no, I typically do the lead part. Ron is up there with me because he is writing stuff down as things are being presented. I try to write things down because if they're moving pretty fast, you know, we try to get this done in about an hour and a half because there's a ton of prep work. You know, like students have to do prep work. All volunteers have to do prep work. Our supervisory committee is involved in this also. And so, no, I am I am literally using your by the book method. And so you see me in the classroom do this, and it is almost identical to what I do in the classroom. We're getting ideas from and we're writing them down, and then after we've kind of exhausted that, we go back and it's kind of like a joint. Okay, how are we going to prioritize this? What is highest importance, and then what's important. We don't put anything up there that's not important, but we have some things that we think are just like critically important, and we put that up, and then we give the importance. Then that goes to management, except last year we did it a little differently, and which was very helpful. Last year we had the facilitator come in and just observe the volunteer session. So, and then what happened was the senior leadership team came on, and they met with, they get this list that we produce, and then we sit down, I sit down with the facilitator and the leadership team and answer any questions they have regarding the list that we gave them. And there's always questions, which means I could always probably do a better job at generating the list. But they always seem to have some really good questions, because they want to make sure they're addressing the issue, the exact issue that the board is bringing them. And that probably turned out to be, we say it every year because it's been evolving every year, but I think our planning sessions get better every single year that we've been doing this. And that's the follow-up study, which I'm going to try to rope Brandon into helping with, which is when we go back and evaluate this. I want to get the case out there first, which will happen this summer, and then try to get you involved in the evaluation part, because I like your landscape theory stuff, that you're fit.
Good. Well, you can count on me. I mean, it's a very, very interesting project. Do you have any advice for the members of the DBA community who might want to implement something like this? But I noticed that Fed has his hand up now, so we can also, why don't we bring him in, and then you can maybe give some advice at the very end.
Okay.
Thanks, Graham. I actually have two questions, but I'll only ask the second one if nobody else raises their hand. The first one is, we've heard, and thanks for all this information, it's very interesting. I think most of what I heard was governance that was internal looking, like towards your internal procedures and how you operate the business. And I was wondering if, with how competitive this banking industry has become with digital transformation, online banking, all that the consumer expects from a bank or from a financial institution, do you also deal at the board level with that part, with the market, with the consumer expectations, with all that, and where would that be? Or is it more operational that your executive part, not the board, but the employees deal with that?
Well, we get a summary of that from the senior leadership team. Rick, you probably talk about this better than me, but we do polls, surveys of our membership. We do employee surveys, and the board gets the results of those surveys every year. We look at them and say, what are you doing about this? If there's an issue, or response rates, which for our credit union are just totally unheard of. The engagement of the employees has gone up astronomically in the last few years. I think the Baldrige journey really helped us with that. But Rick,
well, the only thing I would add to that is looking externally, which the supervisory committee is charged with under their charter. They bring in the CPA firms that review all of our records. The CPAs contact our members if there's any issues that the members are having where they don't think the appropriate steps are being taken to protect their assets. They work through that. We like that because it's independent of management. But there is other ways they can. We have 3 different ways. They can come directly to the supervisory committee, they can come to management, or they can go to the CPAs that we engage through the supervisory committee if members are seeing concerns around risk and volatility in that area. So that's a good structure. There's an they can also do it anonymously as well, and that goes to the supervisory committee. So I wouldn't even see it. So I like that check and balance, so that I really don't want all of that resting over with me in the leadership side. It needs to be spread across our volunteers as well to give appropriate risk to that so it can be addressed.
You mentioned the regulators, and I work in cybersecurity. I was wondering if you're getting more scrutiny and more regulation around data privacy and data security these days that you have to deal with.
Only
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That's part of what the IT committee, we were thinking, well, maybe we don't need the IT committee, but as it turns out, our vice president of information technology does not want that committee to go away. And because they want to show us everything they're doing as far as regulatory, cybersecurity. We get these detailed updates that probably aren't appropriate for the entire board, but definitely we drill down in the committee level, and we meet quarterly for the IT committee does. And we get updates on all the latest hacking stuff, ransomware, everything that's been hit, which banks got hit, how hard, how will we deal with the response? If this were to happen, what are we doing to ensure that this is not going to happen? And then we give a summary to the board. If there are board members who want to know more, then they're either welcome to join the committee, or Ron and I'll sit down with them and explain the best we can. Then we'll get management involved if necessary. But it's definitely a wide open information sharing environment.
And I would just add, because that's a really great question, and that kind of what we're doing here, what we just described, Rick described, that's known. But what I found out 2 weeks ago that wasn't known was our Fidelity bond came up for renewal. And when I was in meeting with the Fidelity bond folks, they were questioning me about what we were doing in these areas. And if you're not big enough to have the resources that are necessary to put this into, your bond is going to be substantially higher. And I think that's going to cause a lot of smaller institutions who can't put in all the authentication requirements and everything that's needed for online access. They don't have the resources. They're going to be priced out if that doesn't work because the members reject it. There's going to not be able to afford the cost of the Fidelity bonds as the losses continue to go up and up. So I thought that was a new way that the insurance companies now are going to get themselves involved, not just regulators, but the insurance bonding companies.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Fed.
I want to thank you all so much for what's been a really fascinating panel session. May the folks here who are interested in following up contact you directly, Rick?
Absolutely. They have my email address probably already. I've still got the same USF email address, rwill@usf.edu. Yes, absolutely. Contact me, and I'll be glad to take the point on that. Anyone else wants to volunteer, that's great too. I don't mind taking an email and forwarding it to maybe Rick or Ron that could do a better job of answering the question.
And for those of you who are affiliated with USF, let me tell you, the credit union is a great place to work with for your financial assets, and I encourage you to join if you have not already done so. Unless there are any further comments, that's the end of our panel session. I want to thank everyone for coming here, and thanks to all 3 of our panelists for coming in. We really appreciate that. It's been a great addition to the conference. And with that, thank you all very much, and I'll see those of you in the audience later today.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks for having us, Brandon.